Our cameras are now at Fort Washington Armory in Upper Manhattan. For Gussie Moran and Tony Trabert, here he is, and tennis, everyone. In England, they still call it lawn tennis for the simple reason that that's where they play it. But lawn tennis is an offshoot of a much older and very complicated game called court tennis. It was very hard to play and is almost impossible to explain, which will be a great relief to everybody. Lawn tennis itself was invented in England by a determined soldier, Major Walter Clopton Wingfield, who was eager to enliven the civilian bivouac known as a lawn party. And a year later, it was transported to America by a native of Staten Island, Miss Mary Ewing Outerbridge, who bore, as you see, a very fortunate resemblance to Gussie Moran. She staked out a court of sorts at the Staten Island Cricket and Baseball Club, and in a few years the game began to look like this. The two objects of the game, from the lady's point of view, were to get the ball over the net and see that her dignity didn't go with it.
Should a lady incline to engage in physical sport, and the inclination itself is questionable, she must in all events avoid any exposure or ungraceful posture of the limbs, grimacing of the countenance, or shrill outcry. Above all, she must guard against haste or perspiration, repugnant to all persons of breeding, and look to the essential dignity of her costume.
Well, as the game grew less genteel, which it's doing every second, and more competitive, there came the only possible solution to the problem of costume, which is the costume of Gussie Moran. Oh, Gussie, could we have a private word about your costume?
Sure.
Well, it has pretty striking aesthetic advantages, but if I may, is it ideal for playing tennis?
Well, no, not exactly, Mr. Cooke. You see, we actually need a little more arm room. As a matter of fact, it was George Bernard Shaw who said to Helen Wills Moody one night at dinner, "You know, tennis is a game which should be played in the long grass, in the meadow, and in the nude."
Well,
well, I don't think it will come to that in this country.
Not in this program.
Let's hope not. But however, I do think that the gals should have briefer costumes, you know, so you have more movement. And as a matter of fact, I think it will be in the near future when we'll be wearing bathing suits or leotards, perhaps.
Well, how about the men, Tony?
Well, actually, in the old days, the men used to play in outfits like this: the long white pants, the blazer, and appear on the scene in a straw hat. But the men of today have found it much more satisfactory to wear shorts.
Well, now, Gussie, it's true, isn't it, costume aside, that there are no special rules for women's tennis?
Oh, no, they're the same as for the men, just
All right.
the same.
Well, now, that being so, can men and women compete on even terms?
Well, no, they can't really. You see, we're built differently. What I mean by that is our hips are different. You see, a woman can run this way, and then she can cover court this way.
Sideways, both sideways.
Sideways, she does that very well. But when she starts going up, like running up and then running back, that's when she runs into trouble.
Mm-hmm.
You see, she isn't as efficient as the man because of the construction of the hip. Now, there's a second reason, too, of course. The second reason being a man is stronger, he hits the ball harder, he has more power.
Does Tony Trabert have more power, you think?
Well, I think he has more power than I have. As a matter of fact, I think we can demonstrate a little bit here with our serves. Don't trip. Maybe we'll get a better contrast if we do it together.
You're too good, that's the trouble.
Well, you know, it really is much harder, but if you can't tell that, maybe, Tony, you would go over and you'd serve to me like you do in a big tournament or Davis Cup, and then maybe you'll see the difference. I'll try to return them. Now, this is what you'd call the big game. Hey, Tony, hit one to me that I can return. That's the big game, all right. You see, I returned it. Still, he comes up to the net. He volleys it away, and what chance is the girl?
There's no faking in that, Gussie, was there?
No.
All right.
We're not amateurs, but there was no faking.
Tony, is there an age limit or a health limit for tennis players? What would you say, Gussie?
Well, no, there really isn't an age limit, but I would like to point out, you know, that women are sort of responsible for bringing tennis around to this country.
I don't think there's an age limit either, Alistair. Actually, you can play from the time you can pick up a racket and right on through to your 80 or 85 years old if you want to. I mean, really anybody can play, even Jack Sido. Jack, try this, will you?
Oh, my goodness.
Jack, I remember I told you there are 3 rules. 1, forehand. 2, backhand. 3rd, the serve. Now, you're not even holding the racket like I told you. Remember, shake hands with the racket. Oh, fine. Okay. Now, if we may borrow from the May Sutton Bundy period and the Old English, we'll do the old type of backhand where you bring it back and you put your cup and saucer of tea here. You bring it through, cup and saucer of tea again. Now, you try that, Jack. Tony? Well, that's not bad, Jack. That's fairly good. Now we try it with the forehand, but with the forehand, no tea. Tone? Well, you're improving. I mean, there's hope for you. Now we come to the service. And with the service, you know, we put a ball in the hand, and we put this racket there. Okay, now we'll go through it once. 1, 2, and over. Now, you try it. Well, that's not bad, and I think you're almost ready for a game. So why don't...
Tony, would you like to show us 3 or 4 essential strokes or even grips that a learner ought to master?
Fine. Well, the forehand grip is just like you're shaking hands with the racket. You just put your hand alongside the racket handle, take a firm grip, and as you'll see, my fingers are extended a little bit along the grip, which gives you a little more feel and a good solidity on the handle. The backhand grip, you go over the top, quarter of a turn, and then also you'll see my fingers are spread apart. And this backhand grip you also use for serving. Now, I'll step back and demonstrate the forehand and the backhand. And I want you to notice how, as the ball comes, I turn sideways to the net, I get my racket back, and I watch the ball at all times. The forehand grip, remember, is like shaking with the racket. Sideways, and hit. Sideways, racket back, watching the ball. Now, the backhand, you're over the top a quarter of a turn, and then the same thing. Turn sideways, racket back, and hit. Sideways, racket back, and hit.
Tony, I noticed that you not only turn sideways, but you maneuver into maybe an instinctive distance from the ball. Now, what should that be, and where should your racket lie in relation to the ground?
Well, the idea is to get comfortably away from the ball. You don't want to be cramped on either stroke, hit the ball in too close to your body, and the racket head should be about parallel with the ground as you make contact with the ball, much in this manner.
Mm-hmm. Now, Gussie, I've got a rather blunt one for you. Doesn't competitive tennis, giving your whole physical life to training and playing one game, doesn't it take all the fun and value out of it?
Well, it doesn't really take the fun out of it. You might say that competing for a gal sort of makes her terribly hard inside, and then, of course, there's the outside thing, too. You play out in the sunshine, you towel off, and you take a shower, and then you go out into the hot sunshine again, and you towel off, and then you take a shower. It sort of dries you up, but I certainly must say you have an awful lot of fun while you're drying up.
Gussie, I couldn't agree more, and actually I think that we sort of thrive on competition. I personally really enjoy the competition, and I have a lot of wonderful experiences traveling around the world, but I think the thing that I really remember and will always remember was the first time I represented America in the Davis Cup matches, because when I went up to that baseline down in Australia, about 26,000 people watching, and instead of saying Tony Trabert serving, they suddenly said United States serving, and believe me, that was a real thrill. Here's the 1954 challenge round. I'm in the near court playing Lou Hode in the first match, and this was first match in our victorious try against the Australians, Sydney, Australia. There's Kenny Rosewall serving in the doubles. We're on the far court. That's Fixatious on the left in the far court. I'm on the right. There's Kenny Rosewall hitting a lob. There's a Hode fan. Kenny Rosewall again. Oh, that's me on the ground. I don't think that's quite the way to play the game. I don't recommend that. That's Prime Minister Menzies, a great tennis fan. Here's the final point of the Davis Cup. That forehand I hit there won the Davis Cup for America the first time in 7 years. That's, of course, the Davis Cup, something that we tried so hard to win. With those shots, of course, you can see how thrilled Vexatious, Bill Talbert, and I were to have won the Davis Cup.
That's a wonderful place to end, Tony, but since we're 6 miles apart, I've got a parting shot for you. Maybe you'd like to sit down.
Maybe I'd better.
And I'd like to hear the opinions of both of you on this. Is there any truth in the popular suspicion that, that a lot of amateurs who don't turn pro still make a profitable, not to say parasitic, living as what I think you call tennis bums?
Well, the appellation tennis bums is one which I dislike, although I've heard it used from time to time. Naturally, there's money involved, expenses and whatnot, but I've never heard of an amateur tennis player becoming a millionaire, a tycoon, or very rich while he was playing amateur tennis.
Well, that's true, Gussie, and I think that if amateurism is broken at any time, I really feel it's the fault of the amateurs running the tournaments, because if they refuse to give the amateur tennis players anything but the legal expense money, which is $15 a day and round-trip transportation, then obviously the amateurism could not be broken. I remember when I was traveling on the circuit as a youngster trying to learn the game. I wasn't very good, and no one cared what I was around. No one gave me any expenses. And suddenly, after I won a few matches and a few tournaments, I received a little expense money, but I also found that I came under the dictatorship of some of the amateur officials who told me that if I went to Europe, I had to come back at a certain time to play tournaments in America and so forth. And it was hard for me to understand why I, as an individual, should be told by these people where I should play and when I should return. And tennis being what it is today, I feel that there's one thing that we need very badly, and that's open tennis. By open tennis, I mean that the amateurs and the pros play in the same tournament. The amateurs don't lose their amateur standing, and if by chance an amateur would win the tournament, they would receive a trophy. If a professional won, he would receive prize money. But all this would stimulate interest both in the public and everyone else, and I hope and we think that it would get the kids interested so that they would start playing tennis at a young age instead of playing football, basketball, baseball, and golf.
Well, that's one thing that I really wouldn't want to see, Tony. I wouldn't like to see tennis become an open game because it's one of the few supposedly amateur sports left in this country. And it has much tradition about it. It's, the white flannels and the wonderful white tennis shirts and everything. And old tradition. It's just wonderful. And I, for one, just wouldn't want to see it change. But I don't think we're going to resolve it at all.
I doubt it.
I know, Tony, you're a little stronger than I am. We proved that a little while ago. But would you rally with me?
Sure, I'd love to, Gussie.
Right.
That was Miss Gus Moran and Tony Trabert in Tennis, Everyone.